So we were talking about PGE. We have 4 people today.
Oh, for public comment or?
No, just like commissioners attending it.
Oh.
Week before holidays. It's tricky.
Yeah, totally.
Hey, you found us.
No problem.
Sorry about the mix up there.
All right.
Nice day for a bike commute.
It's a really nice day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Warm.
Yeah, it's almost too warm. We're over prepared right
rain,
now.
yeah.
I know.
Rain.
There was some pretty heavy rain 2 days ago.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Tuesday was
Totally
like
so.
That was
torrential.
wild, yeah.
There's a section of Highway 14 that don't drain well, and I hit like, 3 or 4 inches of standing water. I'm like, thank goodness the car is heavy, because
Yeah.
Yeah, do you think really?
I was just gonna say, there's that
like this
spot on
standing
really,
puddle where you're just biking and then all of a sudden your feet are underwater. Yeah.
it's bad, yeah.
Yeah.
So they should change this
Like,
there.
It's like, or when the car hits a puddle right next to you, and then you're
And
like,
it's just like gross.
like oil, street water all over you,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
at least the leaves are getting cleaned up now. I passed some of the street sweepers on the way in.
Yeah.
I was like, come, come, come.
I
Yeah.
saw one on Rosa the other day clearing out, and I was like, oh.
God, the bike routes are a mess. They're
There's
like
some-
covered in leaves right now.
Like, that'd be a great, like, PSEF funding to encourage, like.
Yeah, more
cycling
biking.
is paying for cleaning the
It's like
bike
I
lanes.
Under
think
the
they did
leaves.
get some,
Did they?
I did at least apply for some kind of bike lane or something.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, that's a big need,
I think there's like one in the city.
which is,
They
guess
only
it's like
have
this.
one.
my perspective, tree drop and weather is occurring correctly. You don't want to have snow when the leaves are still up.
yeah, well, that's when the trees come down.
Yes.
That's not good.
That is my.
Yeah.
my
Wait to
position.
get cold till the leaves are all off the tree.
And don't do it after the leaf out.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, we had that weird April storm.
2021.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had a lot of weird everything.
Can everyone on Zoom hear us? I got a message that one person couldn't hear us.
Oh,
Okay,
Bruce is
good.
good. Do we have
Very good.
one? Let's see one.
See, okay.
I'm hearing you well. You were silent for a few
Or-
minutes or a couple minutes, so.
Okay, whatever it was, looks like we got it worked out.
Oh, there comes yours, JR.
We should probably get started. Yeah. Okay, and then JR just jumped on.
Good morning. All right, well, we'll get started. Welcome everyone. We'll kick off with public comments. Do we have any public comments today?
No one has signed up, but if there's anyone attending who would like to provide a comment, they can raise their Zoom hand right now and do that. But I don't see any, so I think we're good.
All right, I guess we can move on to approving the minutes from November. And am I remembering, did we do October or was it just November? Just November,
We
right?
approved October last meeting,
Yeah,
so
just
just November, yep.
Are there any edits or questions about the November minutes?
I know that Bruce emailed some helpful comments around, including the addresses for the heritage trees that were voted on and the name of the property owner for Heritage Tree 9, because
okay.
they did provide their name when they attended the meeting.
Great, thanks, Bruce. All right, do we have a motion to approve the minutes with those edits from November? Adrian? Adrian, go ahead if you can.
Oh, yeah, no, I moved to approve the minutes.
Great. I second it, or Casey? Okay, all in favor, raise your hand, virtual or real? Great, any opposed? I think Bruce and Adrian just have a little bit their say. Any abstentions? All right, great. Thanks, everybody. I think we can move on to the Forester's report for this.
Well, thank you. Hi, everyone. Paul Anderson here. I'm acting city forester. I'm normally the operations manager in Delta Park. And I've got 5 items for you. Urban Forester recently learned the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, BPS, is developing city code changes affecting environmental zones. The proposed changes include potential impacts on the urban forest in the areas. Land and environmental zones includes natural areas. Together, Portland Parks and Recreation, Urban Forestry, City Nature, Planning, and the Indigenous Community Coordinator have submitted initial comments to BPS and look forward to being further involved in that project. Urban Forestry has requested that BPS present the project to the Urban Forestry Commission at an upcoming meeting, while any proposed changes are still in development, and receive UFC advice. We'll keep you apprised of the project, and it may be a January agenda item. The filling of 2 vacant Urban Forest Commission commissioner seats continues on track. 2 candidates are proceeding in the process, including confirming their interest, availability, and initiating the process for mayoral appointment. Thank you to Commissioners Lilly and Plack for their contributions and time interviewing the candidates. We hope to be able to share the candidates' names in an upcoming commission meeting and have new commissioners seated on the UFC this spring. City has recently contracted an independent auditor to inspect the use of parks local option levy funds. The audit found the levy funds were used in compliance with voter approved commitments, and that the levy dollars were clearly tracked using strong financial systems and tracking mechanisms to ensure transparent management of funds. I found that Portland Parks and Recreation developed and used a methodological model to ensure levy resources are not used to reduce general fund support to PPNR, and employed an effective framework to operationalize day-to-day management of the levy. With the rest of PPNR, Urban Forestry has worked to ensure appropriate, accountable, and transparent use of levy funds, and is pleased with the audit findings. That document is in the chat or will be soon, and is expected to be available online soon as well. Heritage tree number 9 was addressed at the last UFC on behalf of the Urban Forestry and the City Forest at the City Forest's request. Instead, I want to acknowledge that bringing Heritage Tree 9 discussion to the UFC before having a clear decision point was a mistake, and apologize for the confusion and upset that caused. Urban Forestry strives to be transparent in the way information is shared, and the information on Heritage Tree number 9 was presented in a way that did not foster that goal. The UF team has made improvements to our process for future Heritage Tree decisions. In the future, Heritage Tree discussions will have clear decision points for the UFC to consider, and will include the position of the property owner. Discussion on the way forward for Heritage Tree number 9 is ongoing, and there is no decision for the UFC to make in this meeting. Should there be a decision for UFC on this tree, our team will bring it forward at a future meeting. Finally, the tree maintenance operations team, which I lead, responds to right-of-way and city-owned and managed property tree emergencies on a daily basis, as well as major storm response, among other duties. The TMO team has been making preparations and improvements to our severe weather posture this season, including tighter collaboration with our partners at the Portland Bureau of Emergency Management and Portland Bureau of Transportation. Some of these improvements include co-deploying assets like snowplows and bucket trucks during ice and snow events together to to respond, and solidifying common understanding of citywide emergency priorities and terminology. And that is the end of the city forest's report. Happy to take any questions.
There is one hand raised from one of our attendees, but I want to make sure we have any questions from the commission first.
I have a question. Thank you for the report. So you said that it's ongoing with Heritage Tree number 9. Do you have any updates you can provide us?
Yeah, so my involvement is quite limited. My understanding is that more information has come to light and their discussion about the best way forward. But there is no decision to make today.
Not right now. We do have Casey on the meeting though, in case there's anything Casey can provide an update on. Yeah.
Yeah, at this point, what I can say is that we're continuing to work with the property owner. They had not really provided us exactly what it was that they wanted to do until after that Urban Forestry Commission meeting last month. And we've recently just found out this week that they are working with a new company. So really, there's not a whole lot to say other than that. We're continuing to work with them, make sure that we're both clear with one another in terms of what it is that they're looking to do, as well as what it is that we need them to do in terms of public safety and infrastructure. But we're sort of waiting at this point as they sort of get their new company on board with the situation. And we have not yet had an opportunity to talk with that new company, because I think they just hired them maybe 2 days ago or so. So really, there isn't a whole lot to say as of yet, as we really and truly are just continuing to work with them. However, we have been pretty clear in our communication to the property owner that there is going to need to be something done to that tree because there are safety concerns. What that something is what we're still working with them on, because we do want to acknowledge what it is that they'd like to see happen and take that into consideration with the safety concerns that we have based on the information that's been provided to us. Does that help?
Yes, it does. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. Any other questions about the forester's report?
Great. Matt, thanks for your patience. I'm gonna bring you into the meeting here.
Matt, well, you're welcome to ask your question if you're still with us.
Or maybe that was an accidental hand raise. Okay, it might have been accidental.
Anything in the chat?
Mm-mm.
I got a notification that said that Matt declined to be promoted to a panelist, so
Okay.
maybe it was a mistake.
Okay,
Gotcha.
thank
Okay.
you.
All good.
Okay, well, I'm guessing we're probably waiting on folks for the PGE part of the agenda.
Yeah, I'm messaging with Laura. I think she should be able to jump in now. So.
Okay.
And I sent this out over email, but just letting, again, thank you to Commissioners Clapp and Meissner for helping draft the statement regarding the PSEP positions. That was submitted, I believe, on Monday morning. So appreciate helping us elevate that issue.
Did we get a response from that at all?
We did, and we have, there was a memo drafted by the Human Resources Director, essentially stating that PSEP positions are funding ongoing and should be approved as regular. We haven't seen the positions actually come through approved as regular yet, so I think there's positive indications, but we haven't really seen things loosen up in the way that we are hoping for. So hopefully more on that soon though.
Yeah.
Okay, Laura should be hopping on.
She looks like she joined us.
Oh, she is. Okay,
I
great.
am here, but I'm hoping we can wait just a minute and give Marshall a chance to join. I just texted him to let him know. He was planning to join at 9:50, so he should be standing by.
Gotcha. Thank you. We also have Jason and Dan, NPC from our permitting and regulation team as well, since they've been involved in this project also.
If we have a moment that I'm wondering if you folks, we got some feedback from Brian about what folks were hoping to hear, and I think we're gonna cover that in our presentation. But I'm curious to know if, the Urban Forestry Commission is thinking about submitting comment on this application in the public process.
I think we should. But I'm just one member.
I know that's come up in our conversation, that we thought, when we kind of learn a little bit more about what's happening with the status, that we may want to do that.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
a lot of questions today would help inform that. A lot of
Sounds good.
answers.
Yeah, just one other comment. It would be helpful to know, you know, what would be the best timing on that. I know that the Parks Board is also interested in that. You know, if we do submit, probably it would be sort of easier to have two separate but supportive submissions. Anyway, yeah, it's worth our talking about, yeah, politics and methods and that type of thing, if it's reasonable.
Okay, and in our presentation, we'll go over kind of the timeline for the process, where it currently is, and those opportunities to comment. And then I will just share my understanding of where the Parks Board is, you know, they previously submitted a comment to City Council, and that comment's been submitted into the record, but I believe they're gonna be submitting another comment letter specific to this process. And I believe that at their next meeting, which I think is January 14th, they are gonna talk about whether they're going to have a representative go speak at the hearing, which will be January 29th, and that information's in the slideshow. So I think they're still working on what their plan is.
Our new counselors kind of being briefed on this issue, because I know it's like a huge turnover
Yeah.
to the council, so.
Yeah, and I don't know I know that they're, I don't know if I know they have their big briefings all set up for everybody, and I don't know if this is a part of that. I think the briefing would come from permitting and development. So I would certainly expect that they probably are, but they might be keeping the briefing to a minimum, because this is gonna be decided by a hearings officer. If there's an appeal, the appeal will be heard by council, so then council will need to know what's going on. But the land use law, you usually don't talk with them too much outside of the process, ex parte contact, if you speak with them kind of outside of the process, because they need to hear everything through the process. So they might be kind of giving them some general awareness so they know what's coming, but they probably aren't gonna be diving into details with them. Okay, well, I don't see Marshall. I'm wondering if maybe I can jump in and do some of my pieces of the presentation, if that works for folks, just so we're using our time well.
Yeah, sounds good.
Do we want to give him another minute or two?
Yeah, I think if you're able to start with your piece, and then hopefully he'll be on soon.
Sounds good.
Thanks.
I am going to see if I can share my screen. Okay, can folks see my PowerPoint there?
Yep, thank you.
Okay, fantastic. So as you know, we're here to provide a briefing on the this transmission corridor project, and this is an updated, I think we were last here in September, so we're just back with an update for y'all. Our little agenda that we have, we're gonna provide an update on the project. So what's changed the last time that we came to brief this group? The project was still incomplete. The application was incomplete. It's since been deemed complete and the process is moving forward. So there is the substance, the overall substance of the application is mostly the same. But there are some additional detail that we have available for us at this time. And so we'll share some of that. Then I'm going to talk about the approval criteria. If the Urban Forestry Commission does decide to submit comments do need to focus on the approval criteria and whether the reasons why the application does or does not meet those approval criteria. And then I'm going to just share a little bit about the comments that PPNR submitted to planning and development or permitting and development, and that we will be submitting once the hearings officer comment period opens. And then a little overview of the land use review process. I'm just trying to resize my window so I'll be able to see if Marshall joins us. Okay, so I'm gonna skip, Marshall was gonna do the project update, so I'm just gonna skip over those pieces for now until he joins. So I'm just gonna make us all a little seasick spinning through some slides here. And I'm going to jump into the alternatives analysis because I heard that there was a lot of interest in this group in the alternatives analysis that PGE provided. So we have a little bit of information to share on that. So PGE provided 2 separate reports that together kind of serve as their alternatives analysis. So they submitted a report from 2022 by a group called Toth and Associates. And the Toth and Associates report really focused on, it looked at 8 alternatives that had less impact on Forest Park. So most of the alternatives in this this study didn't include alternatives like reusing the existing poles. It looked at different routes. And so they looked at, like I said, they looked at 8 different routes. And their final conclusion was that of the 8 routes they considered, 2 of them, alternative 4 and alternative 8, were potentially feasible to move forward. So I have this little matrix that is pulled out from the report. So green is a mild impediment, meaning it's pretty good to go. Yellow is a moderate impediment. Red is a major impediment. And this is after they had mitigated. So for example, in alternative 4, the building proximity, the first row, was red when it was unmitigated, but then they determined that they could mitigate those impacts by acquiring those buildings, and so it changed. So this is the mitigated one. Hello, Marshall. I skipped ahead to my pieces, and then maybe I was thinking maybe we could just circle back around. Does that sound okay to you?
Yep, just let me know whenever you're ready. I can jump in.
Okay, super. Maybe I'll do the alternatives analysis, and then we can go back to the top and do your pieces.
Okay.
So this initial report from 2022, out of these 8, they determined there were 2 alternatives that were potentially viable because the primary impediments were existing PGE infrastructure, which PGE has control over. So then as part of this application, initially they provided a more recent report from 2024 by David Evans and Associates, where they looked at the alternatives we had listed at the top here. So one is use existing towers. One is use 4 circuit structures, so have more lines on the towers. One is using taller structures to minimize the impacts of the forest. One is the alternative they've selected, and then they looked at those Northwest Marina Way alternatives that avoid Forest Park, that those alternatives 4 and 8 from the previous study fall into that category. And so they did an analysis of these alternatives, this different set of alternatives. And at that time, they decided that those alternatives 4 and 8, you can see here, if you look at the Northwest Marina Way, I don't know if y'all can see my cursor, but if you look at this Northwest Marina Way column, you'll see that these alternatives outside the park were eliminated because of cost and because of time, that it would take too long to implement. And so that is why they selected the alternative that they are going with. I will pick the string of the alternatives analysis back up when we talk about the approval criteria, but I think at this time we should go back up to the top and let Marshall give his updates on what's changed or the additional detail that we have on the project. So I'm just going to scroll back. Okay, take it away, Marshall.
Okay, thanks, Laura. Okay, so thanks for having me again. As you know, PG resubmitted their application with some additional material and some minor revisions to their plans, their proposed plans. This included more extensive alternatives analysis and a copy of the report from the consultant they hired to look at possible pathways outside of Forest Park. Laura just went through that material or that information. Also, in response to our concerns for inaccuracies in the original tree survey, they revised the survey. Unfortunately, we're still seeing some inaccuracies in the new survey, so that will still need to be addressed going forward. They submitted an updated mitigation plan after more coordination with our team. For that, currently, PP&R is recommending that if this project were to be approved, PGE should be required to restore and replant all of the disturbed areas in the project area itself. And then in addition, PGE would pay into the fee for mitigation fund, which would be used by PP&R to implement mitigation in the park for forest ecosystem and wildlife habitat enhancements. They also submitted additional narratives and plan details to address various incomplete application comments from the city. However, after reviewing the updated submittal, PP&R still has concerns for multiple parts of this proposed plan. The concerns are laid out in the PP&R and the urban forestry land use review responses that were sent to Portland Planning and Development. The main tree-related issues include that the applicant still does not provide sufficient justification for the proposed tree removals. Also, the tree protection plan does not provide adequate protection as depicted in their proposal for the trees and the areas to remain within the subject site. Then we also need to address that incorrect tree size measurement issue with the tree survey. We need that so that we can accurately review the proposal and also determine the mitigation requirements, which are based on diameter of the trees. So as we presented last time, the undeveloped portion of this site is a steep, densely forested area with a stream running through the middle. Next slide, please. This is the primary development that's proposed, just overlaid on that aerial photo. The red outline surrounds the subject site where activities would occur. In general, the proposed development plan has not changed from the original submittal. It still includes impacts to the park, including significant damage to at least 4.7 acres of forest park from clearing understory vegetation, removing 397 trees, excavating and leveling slopes, building new roads and permanent structures, and filling 2 wetlands. This image shows the major development proposed overlaid on the aerial photo. Like I said, this is something I created just to try to show visually what's proposed. You can see on the right side, upper right side of the area outlined in red, that's significant grading that's proposed to create cuts in the slope and push the soil down and create large flat landing areas that they can use to work to relocate one tower in this location and then build a new one in that location. You also have fairly significant amounts of grading on the lower left portion of the site. That's for building one new pole tower and then also for working on 3 or 4 of the existing towers, which they are proposing to reconfigure. So it's a fair amount of significant earthwork related to that part of the proposal. Also in this image, you can see 2 parallel lines running through the middle of that subject site. The heavy lines are the proposed heavy logging roads they would build. You can also see it's sort of faint, but you can see where the new power lines would go, and then the relocated lines. So trees and forested area underneath those would be cleared for clearance to those lines. And then between the two logging roads, heavy logging roads, there would be a significant amount of other logging equipment used to cut and haul trees out of the central area to get the logs to the heavy logging road so that they could be maneuvered off the site. Next slide, please. This is the map of the tree survey that was submitted previously to show the location of the tree removals. The red dots on this represent trees to be removed. This is the lower portion of the site. Next slide, please. And this is the upper portion of the site. Just gives you a sense of the location and the extent of the 397 trees proposed for removal. Except for some minor differences, this has not changed since the original submittal. Next slide, please. This is what it looks like on the ground. Just to review briefly, it's a second growth mixed conifer and deciduous forest. Next slide, please. There's a diverse native plant community in the overstory as well as in the midstory and on the ground here, all supporting a variety of wildlife and natural resource functions. Next slide. There's also a significant area of Oregon white oak habitat that would be impacted by the project, including removal of mature oaks, such as the one in this photo. That's on the left side of the photo there. Next slide, please. Forest ecosystem on the site includes streams seen in the photo here on the left, and wetlands and sensitive native plant species. Next slide. It supports a variety of wildlife, as you can see in these photos that I took at the site during the past year or two. In conclusion, the proposed tree removals, the excavation with heavy equipment to level the slopes for construction and for logging operations used to clear the trees would significantly impact these natural resources, are protected by city code and the Forest Park Natural Resource Management Plan. And that's all I have at this point. I'm turning it back over to Laura to proceed and also talk about the approval criteria. Thank you.
Thanks, Marshall. So the approval criteria were listed here, and we can share all of the things that we're mentioning. So we can share our PP&R comments, we can share these slides. So these slides do include links to these approval criteria documents. But the approval criteria for the land use review that PP&D is completing are found both in the Forest Park Natural Resources Management Plan, and this is by reference from 33-430, Title 33 points over to the Natural Resource Management Plan to get those approval criteria, and they start on page 217. And then also there are additional approval criteria for environmental review within the Forest Park subdistrict of the Northwest Hills Plan District in Title 33, and so we have a link here to that as well. So those are the criteria that PP&D uses, and if those criteria are met, then they must approve the application. If they're not met, then they must deny the application. So here on this slide, instead of pretty pictures, I have clips from the approval criteria, but it's just a quick overview of some of the comments that PP&R has provided to PP&D so far on this project. Primary concerns are around the consistency with the approval criteria. The approval criteria for exceptions down here refers back to the criteria for minor amendments, which says that all applications must be consistent with the goals and strategies in the Natural Resource Management Plan. And PP&R has provided comments saying that we don't believe this proposal is consistent with Conservation Goal 1 from the management plan. So that's what I have clipped here. Conservation Goal 1 says to protect Forest Park's native plant and animal communities, its soil and its water resources while managing the forest ecosystem in order to grow a self-sustaining ancient forest for the enjoyment and benefit of future generations. So as Marshall has described, there would be significant impacts to plant and animal communities as well as to water resources if this project were to move forward. So we provided that feedback. We've also provided some feedback about the alternatives analysis and the consistency with the approval criteria there. In the second box here, I have the approval criteria for exceptions. You can see criterion B says that in order to be approved, the proposal must be a park-related development or no alternative locations exist outside of Forest Park for the proposal. This is not a park-related development. And the alternatives analysis has shown that although PGE deemed those alternative routes outside of Forest Park to be impracticable because of cost and of time, this approval criterion does not say that it needs to be a practicable alternative. It just says the alternative needs to exist. So like you can look at sub C right below, it says there are no practicable alternatives locations within Forest Park. That language is missing from sub B. So PP&R has provided feedback saying that the alternatives analysis, although PGE looked at those alternatives and determined that they weren't feasible for this project due to timeline and due to cost, and those alternatives do exist. Also, Marshall mentioned there's some inconsistencies in the tree survey, and that's something that needs to be resolved either prior to approval of the application, or there needs to be a condition of approval requiring those to be resolved, because we need to make sure that we fully understand the impacts and that those tree surveys are accurate before they can move forward. And then lastly, we've provided some comments about the mitigation plan. Right now, PGE's proposal is to do restoration of temporary impacts. So all of the area that's disturbed during construction, they will restore either by seeding, or they have a proposal to plant some oak woodland habitat in the areas where the power lines, the transmission lines will be built. And then they're proposing to pay the Forest Park in lieu mitigation fee for the remainder of the mitigation. So quick overview of where we are in the land use process, because this is a type 3 environmental review and conditional use. There's going to be a hearing before a hearings officer. So PP&D staff will write a staff report that will be available in January, where they will make a recommendation to the hearings officer, and then the hearings that will be considered at the hearing. The hearing's January 29th at 9 a.m. It's on Zoom. Anyone can come and testify at that time. Our staff will be testifying. We, in this process, urban forestry staff, because they have approval criteria, have a little bit different status in the process than the remainder of PP&R. But my understanding is our intent as the natural areas team that we will go provide some testimony as well. And there will be a 20-day public notice prior to the hearing. And during that time, folks can submit written comments to the hearings officer, if either in addition to or instead of testifying at the hearing. It all goes into the public record and will be considered by the hearings officer. And then I think I mentioned before, any appeal that happens after that to that decision by the hearings officer will be heard initially by City Council. So that is where we're at in the process. And I think that's all we had for our presentation. So if there's questions, or if you folks want to open up for discussion, we'd be happy to answer any questions. And I think Brian mentioned, but we have some colleagues from Urban Forestry, Jason and Dan, here as well to support if there are questions about Title 11 pieces. Thank you.
Commissioner Feldstein?
Yeah, a couple of questions. So do we have any insight through any sources about the cost and time that the couple of feasible alternatives would take? You know, it would just be interesting to kind of understand this from PGE's point of view, in addition to all the other good arguments that you've put forth.
We have, I'm trying to share my screen back. We have this, as far as I know, Marshall, you jump in if there's more that I'm missing, but as far as I know, this table from the alternatives analysis is the extent of what we have. And so here they did not specify exactly whether it was Route 4 from the top report or Route 8. I think many folks who have been commenting and talking about this are zeroed in on alternative 4 from that report, but they specified that the cost would be around $26 million as opposed to 10 million for the selected alternative. And that they didn't say how long. I think if I dig into the report, it says how long, but it would not, they want their project to be operational by 2028, and it would not be operational by 2028. So as far as I know, that's the information we have on that. Marshall, do you have anything else?
This is going to add that we do not have any other expertise looking at this to provide alternative information. We don't have any third-party experts helping us look at this that I know of within or outside of the city. It's just what was provided by PGE and their consultants.
Yeah, so this 16 million difference or so in what it would cost them, how might that compare to what they would have to pay in mitigation in a worst case scenario? Do you think? I mean, these are kind of a guesstimates. I'm just sort of thinking out loud about.
Sure. The current estimate for the in lieu fee that they're proposing they would pay is roughly $2.5 million, just based on the trees they're proposing to cut. And that has to be corrected with a corrected tree survey, but it's something in that ballpark. And then the cost of site restoration and planting for the actual impact area of the project, I'm not sure how to quantify that amount. I'd have to hazard a really rough guess, but I probably shouldn't do that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if that mitigation, the sum total comes close to that difference, right? That becomes sort of a strong,
right,
strong point.
It's a lot less than, I would say a lot less than $16 million for all the mitigation. Quite a bit less.
Very quick second question, and that is, so who is the hearings officer and where do they, come from, and do we know anything about them?
Oh, that's a good question. So the hearings officers, there's a suite of them who work for the city, and they're all third party. So they're not city employees. The idea is that they're a neutral third party, and the hearings officers, that's their work that they do. I don't know off the top of my head which hearings officer this has been assigned to, but I can certainly get that information to share it back.
Commissioner Nelson?
How much, just the routine maintenance of the existing power lines, does tree cutting occur for that? I mean, how much of that is likely to occur, in the next 10 years just for keeping the lines clear or whatever?
The current power lines in Forest Park, the management of the maintenance of those lines that I hear about, and it's conducted by PGE, also BPA lines in the park, and their consultants and their contractors that they send in to do the work. And it's periodic. Seems like every few years they come through and they do a chainsaw crew comes through and they cut young trees that are growing up underneath the power lines. And then sometimes they'll do a stump treatment with herbicide on those. That's regular maintenance that happens every few years. And then periodically, and it's very sporadic, the forester will approach me and let me know that she's got plans to send in crews to do some limbing or occasionally remove mature trees that she's deemed a hazard to the existing power lines. It's fairly infrequent, but it does happen.
Okay. Thank you. And I'm hoping that the PowerPoint presentation today can be forwarded to all the UFC members, just for sometimes I forget some of the details. Thank you.
Yeah, this isn't so much a question as a comment, I guess, but going back to what Co-Chair Feldstein was saying about costs, it's kind of balancing the restoration costs with the cost of moving the project. I think something that gets lost when we have those conversations is like, you can't restore a 150-year-old oak tree. Like, you can't plant a baby oak tree and it's not gonna be what it was. And moving in all the road building equipment is gonna bring invasive species into the area. Like that was something that kind of came to my mind, that the reason why it's a native intact habitat is because it hasn't been developed and it hasn't had a road built through the middle of it. So those are just things that I think about, like the costs that are right up front. There's other costs that are harder to quantify. And I feel like there's smart people trying to quantify those kinds of things, but just something else to factor in. Like, it's not restoring it, it's maybe mitigating what was done, but those are kind of, in my mind, two different things.
I would agree with you. That was one thing that came up that I took a note on, that restoration is really just not the right term. They're talking about restoring what they impact, but they're not planting trees that can get even remotely as tall if they plant trees at all. So on one hand, they say they're gonna restore it, and on the other hand, we hear that they are coming in to remove even small saplings. So we know that that is just not true. But I also want to comment that this is similar to what I said the last time about this whole project, is that it is just status quo. Build new lines and put them across through the forest. This is not what we should be doing, I think, as a city. I don't think it's what we should be doing anywhere in the West because of wildfire issues. And right now, this is just strictly trying to get more power to the other side of the hill for really no significant benefit to the city of Portland. It's no significant benefit to the park that's right there right now. So I just don't think that this is something that should be happening. And I think it seemed very clear from Laura's presentation that it is not meeting very explicit and obvious criteria to say this should be a park development. I know that this is a big project, so maybe it's, you know, they would consider it outside of the realm of exactly what that is, but that's just not how we've written the code, and we've done that for a reason. We don't want this forest park to get taken away. The habitat that Marshall pointed out is probably extremely rare within the city itself. So I think as we look what the impacts already have, and we've put a big circle around this section, we said, don't touch. And now we're just gonna touch it. Now we're just gonna keep on taking a little bit here, taking a little bit there. I think that the economics are what's driving this, not any of the other factors. So if we think about social and environmental factors, those are not being met in lieu of the economic factor. It's a triangle, it's an equilateral triangle that we should be considering. It shouldn't be that one is an over outsized component, which it always is. And I think that this time, Urban Forestry, our commission, should specifically come out against this because I just don't think it is in anybody's interest except for PGE.
Well, kind of piggybacking on that, do we know more specifics about who's benefiting from this project in the sense of like, where is the energy going? And like what you said about it's not really going to Portland, is that true? I mean, do we have more specifics on why they're needing to build this in the first place?
I'll just say PGE has on their website, they have some information about what they say it is intended to serve. I'm going to see if I can drop a link in the chat for you all. But it's what they say, and actually it's in the application as well, but they say that it's needed to get power to the north, is my understanding. And Marshall, chime in if I'm not characterizing this correctly, but that's what I understand is what their explanation is. It's needed to connect renewable generation that's happening kind of east of Portland with demand that's north of Portland. Does that sound right, Marshall?
Yeah, I think the answer is complicated, and they have their narrative about it. And it quickly gets beyond my level of understanding of like regional power supply issues, but it's hard to imagine that they're not accessing new markets that will be profitable with this project. So I imagine that's part of it.
I can share a drawing if that would be helpful. So in the link that I dropped in the chat, this is the diagram that PGE has been showing. This is from their fact sheet, showing that there's kind of that this is a critical, what they say is a critical bottleneck. It says in the delivery of clean renewable energy from sources in the Northeast and South. So just to make a connection through there.
There is an element of this that I don't think we brought up in our presentation earlier, that that does come up in conversations with the community and other folks around this, which is that the project is presented by PGE as a 5-phase, multi-phase project. We're currently looking at phase 3, which would extend a new section of line into Forest Park, but then it stops. And it's not too hard to look at it, zoom out, and imagine that there needs to be a continuation from there. And so where would that be? And they do have other utility easements that they hold from that point, extending north and west. Particularly one extending north has a currently undeveloped portion of it that's also forested. And then the one heading to the west. And if I can share my screen, I can show an image of those easements.
I think that'd be really helpful, personally. Are these also within Forest Park, or is this other ownership?
Correct. Yeah. Let's see.
There could be like a domino
Yeah,
kind of effect on this project.
yeah, and I
It
also.
is, and so I think the key question around what we're looking at for phase 3 is to what extent we're locking in phases 4 and 5, which could potentially include future impacts to Forest Park. And
Are these not included in the review that's in front of us right now?
I think those dominoes would fall so much easier because they have the easements there, so.
Yeah.
And then it's like, if this got approved, why would you stop those projects? So I feel like this is kind of yeah.
Yeah, it's an issue that happens with cities all over the place where we've split things up, so there's a land use review, then there's development, then they split the lots, and then they do all these things, so everything gets just kind of done piecemeal. And so once you approve the one, then the next domino is, like you're saying, it always has to fall because the previous one just fell. So I think that this is just, this is new information, it's very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And we asked for more information about the phases 4 and 5 because we felt that it was relevant to the current review. And so they provided some more information about that with their response with updated application. But it essentially just confirms, like, yes, there is a phase 4 and 5. If they were to take place, there's a fair chance that they would involve additional impacts, additional lines, and impacts to Forest Park. They're not providing a lot of detail beyond that.
Co-Chair Feldstein?
Yeah, so all this discussion, now I understand why they're willing to sort of essentially go head to head with the code, because they do need the dominoes to fall. Yeah, so do we know anything, or even can we surmise, do we have any even expert consultant who would surmise on what their alternatives would be for 4 and 5? Presumably, either maybe there are none, or they would be, again, looking at additional large costs, or do we know anything about that?
We don't have any outside expertise taking a look at this for us. So I think what we know is what PGE the information that PGE has provided to us, and then what we know about the park. So that's the information that we're working with. I do have, Marshall, did you want me to share this? I have a easement map that Marshall just sent over to me. Should I share that map right now?
Yeah, if people
Yeah,
are
that'd be
interested in seeing that, it shows where PGE currently holds easements in Forest Park, including the current proposed area, which is that right piece on the right side, and then there was the one connecting to their line heading northwest, and the one heading westward as well. And those are all partially developed with power lines currently.
Ryan, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I just had a quick question. There was, in the alternatives analysis, it referenced meeting federal reliability standards by 2028. Does that 2028 date have any significance, or is that simply their preferred date to have that accomplished? I'm wondering, are there any consequences of not meeting those reliability standards by 2028.
My understanding is the 2028 date was set by federal regulators, but I don't know what the consequences are of not achieving that.
Okay, thanks.
This Oregonian article is interesting. Thanks for sharing that. I think folks, if you can look at it, it's worth reading.
Just a quick question for Laura. Do alternatives 4 and 8, which are feasible but not viable, have a specific geographic scope? Are they laid out on the map? Are those, yeah, are they visible? Are they just like there's text around them, but their exact location is unknown?
They are mapped in the Toth report that I referenced in the presentation. Let me see, I have about 100 things from their application materials open on my desktop right now. Let me see if I can share the map. And then the application materials are all publicly available, so we can share the link if you all aren't already connected with that.
That'd be great.
I can just screen share this route here. So this is that report. And so this little map shows routes 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then in the report, I think if I scroll down, it describes each of them. And it talks, so like alternative 4, it has this little, it says it's in private right of way, east of Highway 30, and then it has a route description. But I think the map is useful showing. So this purple line are the existing transmission lines that were on in the red boxes on the last map we were looking at.
Fantastic, thank you.
Yeah, skimming the article, it looks like PGE is saying it is going to help with reliability for North and Northwest Portland. So I hope there's ways for the community to engage in this, because they're also kind of really close to Forest Park, and like I feel like their voices would be really important to hear from in this process.
Yeah, so in the public comment period that's upcoming, and I believe, so the statutory requirement is for 20 days prior to the hearing, but I believe PP&D is planning on opening it a little early because I expect a lot of comments. Anyone can comment and anyone can participate in the public hearing. So there's links on PP&D's website to access that information. Once the notice is available, it'll have a link to sign up to testify at the hearing and the Zoom link for people to be able to attend and listen in. So yeah, hopefully folks can access that. We're happy to help connect people with that information if needed.
Co-Chair Feldstein, I think your hand was first.
Yeah, just a thought. I mean, depending upon how the hearing goes, and hopefully it will be obvious and favorable. But if not, I mean, honestly, the city may need to hire an expert consultant that could better go head to head with PGE, right? Because so it's a bigger, higher level issue than just urban forestry or even parks.
Commissioner Nelson.
I think logistically, our next meeting is, I think, January 16th, give or take a day. I might be off on that. And they'll still be accepting testimony then, but I suspect if we had a meeting and then we were going to discuss something, and by the time it's written, so I think realistically, I doubt if UFC can get something out as a body. I think possibly we need to do it individually. I just think the time constraints, I'm not sure we could get it in a timely manner, because do we even have a quorum at this meeting? So that's just my comment.
Alternatively, we could ask for a subgroup, or a couple of people who might want to kind of stay on this and take the lead in writing like what we just did.
Mhm.
So we do have 6, so we do have a quorum today. If the commission was interested in submitting a statement, we could think here. Laura, when does the public comment period close?
It should be open up until the hearing.
Okay. So.
But I think in general, if you can get your comments in earlier, I think they always appreciate that, but it
Yeah.
should be open until the hearing. Like you can submit written comments at the hearing even.
Okay, that's helpful. So in the past, we have handled statements where the commission votes at a meeting on the substance of the comment. And then editing, minor language tweaks can happen over email since that's not a real deliberation happening. So if the commission wanted to vote today to authorize a statement being drafted, that could be drafted. And then give it a informal thumbs up over email, and then we can submit it sooner. So that is an option available.
Co-Chair Feldstein.
Yeah, I want to move to authorize the drafting of a statement. The question is by whom? We could have staff do the first draft. What are folks' thoughts on that? Unless we have volunteers.
I would be willing to work on it with someone else.
I'd be happy to help write it as best I
Okay.
can.
Yes.
So how about if Casey and I follow the same procedure that he and Justin used for the letter last month? We'll develop it, send it to Brian. Brian sends it out before our next meeting, and at the next meeting, we approve it, revise it, reject it, whatever, but make a decision. And then it goes out after the next meeting, after the January meeting.
Okay, yeah.
So would that be part of your motion, Adrian?
Yeah, yes, thank you. Okay, so I move to authorize the draft of a statement from UFC on this project and authorize Casey and Bruce to do that. Just being the person kind of coming from a background of doing this kind of stuff, it would probably be a lot easier for you guys if you took a draft first from staff. It's pretty kind of a complicated issue, but that's up to you. We won't get into the weeds on that, but yeah, a motion, and so yeah, asking for a second.
I can second.
Second? Nice.
Oh, Commissioner Lilly.
Yeah, so I definitely agree with like the sentiment everyone has been saying, so I share in that. But is this when we're voting, it sounds like there's like we're just writing a letter, but is it the language that we're writing a letter in opposition of the project, or I think just the clarity on the message would help folks write the letter, because giving them more direction on it, like we're opposing this, or we just disagree with the tactic and believe more study needs to happen. Just I think that should be added.
Thanks for that clarification. Yeah.
Yeah, I can add, if I'm writing it, it will be opposed.
We know what we're getting.
I'll clarify.
Shocked.
I can clarify my motion that the motion is to write a letter in opposition to this going forward as proposed by PGE.
And I can add that it would be in favor of an alternative. I don't think that this project should not happen. I
Yeah.
just think as
Yeah,
proposed with the removals and the subsequent dominoes as we discussed to fall.
And I wanna just say, cause I recognize like as a ratepayer, rates are going up. And I understand the pressure of the cost issue, and I know these are really hard things to balance. It's also hard to put it into perspective, cause like, I don't know, like 16 million is a lot of money, but also how does that fall into the whole big picture? But I think also these little things can add up to big things. So I don't know. I'm just putting that out there. It's a lot of pressures on an aging system, and rates are going up a lot for people. And that is an equity issue for sure, because it's impacting lower income folks a lot more. But I still am still in agreement that like we need to really, that if there's another option that can work, we wanna, we don't get to have another old growth forest in Forest Park in any of our lifetimes. So this is a really big deal. Okay, sorry, I feel like I derailed us, but we had a motion and did we have a second?
Did have a second,
Okay,
and then
so-
Commissioner Lilly clarified.
Thanks, we have a clarification. Okay, so all in favor of having UFC draft a letter in opposition, raise your hand, virtual or physical. Okay, any opposed? Any abstentions? I don't think there are this time. Oh, Commissioner Meiser's here. Yes, okay. Thank you. Okay.
Right, and Commissioners Clapp and Nelson, I'm happy to help draft the first version, provide outline or other notes so we can coordinate on that.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks, Brian.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Phil, is there anything else on this topic? We do have on our agenda, it's till 10:45. I also feel like we could easily use that time for the urban forest plan. So last thoughts, Co-Chair Feldstein?
Yeah, the only other thing is whether staff feels it would be useful for us to provide public testimony in addition to the letter. So essentially just, saying out loud the contents of the letter largely, or the bullet points. What does staff feel about that? Who know how these things go, etc.
I feel like that's always helpful to have in-person comments submitted, but I know Laura has more experience with the hearings office process, so.
I think the hearings officer will consider the comments in whatever form they come, so I would feel confident that they'll be taken into account, but it is always nice to show up in person, and I think sometimes people feel that it's helpful to have kind of have them see how many people felt strongly enough to come to the hearing and make their voice heard. But like I said, they're professionals and they will consider the feedback in whatever form it comes.
Yeah, so I feel that it would be useful too. That human touch, in my experience, is really critical. So I'm just wondering if there's anyone who will be in town. Unfortunately, I won't be. Who would be interested on UFC to verbally present the letter.
Could you let us know the date again?
January, did you say the
29th
29th.
at 9 a.m.
Commissioner Clark, we were just wondering about if anybody would be interested to read the letter at the hearing on January 29th. That's what this pause is.
Ah, okay. I could probably do it. If that's what we're waiting for. I don't mind.
Your Lorax moment,
What's that?
your Lorax moment.
It will be, yeah. Add it to the list. Yeah,
No.
that'd be great. Maybe I can suggest that the companies that it'll be serving help pay for it. $16 million.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion that we authorize Commissioner Clapp to present at the January 29th meeting, or we remind me, we should have a meeting beforehand, but does it make sense to authorize that now? What do you think, Brian?
Yeah, I think either way, we have a few minutes on the agenda right now, so we can accomplish it now. That's great.
Okay, yes, I'd like to move to authorize Commissioner Clapp to present whatever the UFC subgroup comes up with, and the others approve, the details by email.
I second that. All in favor? Any opposed? Abstention? Oh, well, then we don't have a quorum.
Actually, you do need to vote.
All right, cool. All right, then I voted in favor of it.
Just that you're voting for yourself.
Yeah.
I know, it's a little awkward. But since there's only 6 of us, we do.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah, all right.
Commissioner Meister abstained.
Which makes perfect sense. Cool. Thanks, everybody. All right, well, I guess we will take our extra 3 minutes into our
Yes.
urban forest plan conversation. But thank you so much, Marshall and Laura, for all of what you presented and for keeping us posted on this ongoing project, the status of it. So thank you.
Of course, thanks for
us.
having us.
Awesome.
All right, good morning, commissioners. I'm Belinda Udelman. I use she and her pronouns, and I'm a planning and policy analyst with Urban Forestry. I'm coming back to give you an update on the urban forest plan. So I'll give an overview of what's in the plan since we're getting very close to releasing it. And then leave some time for discussion of the draft recommendations and actions, since that was proposed for the previous Urban Forestry Commission meeting, but we ended up not getting to it. And then wrap up explaining the next steps that we have left to finish the plan, including getting it all the way to council adoption, and take some time there also for discussion about how the UFC can be engaged moving forward. So to start with, what's inside the draft plan. So it's a very comprehensive document. We start off with an introduction, which explains what is the urban forest. So what is this plan about? What's the purpose of the plan? As well as providing a brief history of urban forest planning in Portland and at the city. Why our urban forest is so important, with an emphasis on importance of large form, climate resilient and native trees. Importance of both city management of the urban forest, but also community involvement, and why the community is so critical to our care moving forward. And then just a call to action to get involved, given the climate crisis and the need for us to take action. And the next section explains the process. So how did we create the plan? What was the timeline? Who was involved? What was all of the engagement that we completed to hear from the community, and what were some of those top priorities we heard from the community throughout that engagement process? And there's a section on the urban forest today, which is sort of like in existing conditions. So a lot of the information in that section is similar to what I presented to you, I think back in April. So some of the maps of where is our canopy distributed, who has less canopy in their neighborhood, and what does that mean? What does different canopy distribution look like on different types of properties? So looking at commercial and residential areas and our streets. And then also some discussion about some of the causes of uneven canopy distribution in Portland and challenges and considerations for urban forest management. So things like the climate crisis, invasive pests and diseases, importance of species diversity, that kind of thing. And then the next three sections are really kind of the meat of the plan. We have our vision and goals, our tree canopy goals, and the recommendations and implementation strategy. So the vision and goals, we've come to you with that a few times, I think. So you've had pretty heavy involvement, as well as our other advisory committees, in developing those. The tree canopy goals, we've also discussed at this meeting and pretty heavily with our other advisory committee meetings, which you also have representation on. And then the recommendations and implementation strategy. So that's our recommendations, which are supported by 50 to 60 actions, timelines, cost estimates, lead and support partners. So all of that we've also been reviewing with you, and we'll talk more about that today. And then the last section is about tracking progress and accountability. So it's important to staff, and we definitely heard that it's very important to community, that they receive frequent updates on what we're doing to implement the plan and how. So that section of the plan will explain what kind of information we'll be updating. So it's the status of the actions, as well as some metrics, how frequently and in what format we'll be providing those updates. That is what will be inside the plan, and you'll get a more brief or a more detailed overview of what's in it once it's ready for public consumption. So for recommendations and actions, just as a reminder, in case anyone hasn't looked at this recently, I'm going to review what our recommendations in the plan are. We have 7 of them. So first is prioritize the preservation and care of the urban forest. Next is reduce the cost of tree care for Portlanders. Third is create new space for trees and other vegetation. Fourth is to expand the urban forest through planting, stewardship, and collaboration. Fifth is to provide inclusive communication, training, and education about the urban forest and tree care. Sixth is use data, tools, and monitoring to support climate adaptation, meet tree canopy goals, and equitably distribute canopy. And 7th is to establish and update city codes, standards, and guidelines to improve community resilience and urban forest health. So far, this is just a kind of a recap of how you've been in this process of creating them to date. So we reviewed the recommendations as well as some of the key actions at the October Urban Forestry Commission meeting. Also provided an opportunity for you to email additional comments. Thank you to Commissioner Nelson for doing that. And then we also provided an opportunity to attend the October Policy Subcommittee meeting, which Commissioner Vandermark attended and provided comments. To provide kind of one more opportunity before it goes public, I'm here today. So before I get into hearing if there's any additional comments that you want to share, I thought I'd summarize what I've heard so far from you all. So this is feedback that I'm going to share right now. It's just what we've heard related to the recommendations and actions. It's not all the other feedback you've shared about the vision and goals and tree canopy goals. So we heard that commissioners want to see action-oriented language, actions that are specific and measurable. That it's important for the city to provide financial assistance for tree-related costs. Also heard the need for sidewalk repair to be included in that. Heard and we've heard many times during commission meetings about the need for the city to fund and take responsibility for street tree maintenance and have a comprehensive program. Also heard about the need for a sort of comprehensive and robust communication and education strategy to communicate benefits of trees, our tree programs and services, permit related information, everything related to urban forestry, as well as including with that some improvements to the website to make it more user friendly. One of our actions is for the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability to develop a design guide or similar type resource to provide examples of ways that trees and vegetation can be integrated with the built environment in different contexts, residential, commercial, and industrial properties. So we heard support from the commissioners for that. Also heard about the need for invasive species management and how important that is, and that needs to continue. And needing to sort of generally work to protect and increase habitat and provide habitat connectivity. So now I'll open it up in case there's any other feedback you'd like to share. And I do want to say, so we have been working on revisions to the draft actions, but I know that you may not have had enough time to kind of look at those multiple times, so we can just reference the initial list of actions that I had shared. Anyone have any other feedback that they'd like to share on the recommendations or actions, or if you have questions about the plan overview, I'm happy to answer those too. Yeah.
For action number 14, and maybe this has already been addressed, but the wording's a little confusing. So develop and implement a tree care program to provide financial assistance to Portlanders for planting and maintaining trees is my suggested edit, and removing dead, dying, or endangered, because I think it's the way it's worded is a little awkward. So that was like a little technical thing. And then for number 15, I was wondering about maybe, I'm guessing I would think your plan is to have a pilot in a high priority neighborhood for the but maybe just to call that out, like to focus on the low canopy, high need area for that pilot.
For the street tree maintenance program?
Yeah.
That's actually TBD, and part of the reason is we will be prioritizing those areas, but the pilot would likely be in several different areas of the city. The report we have from Davey broke the city up into different archetypes, because we'll have different costs based on factors like, is there street tree or is there on-street parking that needs to be accounted for? Is there traffic control? Is it industrial area? That was really interesting, actually. So we could be spreading the pilot out around the city to get a good sense of our costs related to those different archetypes. So we will be absolutely conducting a part of it, but there might be other areas in different parts of our more treated areas, because we do need to know our cost assumptions on those.
So it's like the testing of different scenarios.
Yeah, it's a little more complicated. So in terms of maybe like rolling out the program, I think we would try to prioritize for sure, like East Portland and high priority areas, but for the purpose of a pilot to confirm our costs, it might be a little bit different.
And it'd be great to do outreach around that too, so people know, like,
Yes.
they're not like, why aren't you paying
Yes.
attention to East Portland again, or
Communication, customer service is a big part of it, actually. Yeah, agreed.
Commissioner Nelson?
I've asked this question before and I'm not sure if it's answerable, but I'll ask it again. Is this an administrative document, or is this going to be a city council approved document? In other words, what's happening to this? Who's the final decision makers? Okay, we've got a document.
Yeah, good question. It'll be adopted as a non-binding resolution by city council. That's how other plans like this are adopted as well.
Thank you.
Also, we've made some other kind of clarifications and edits to some of the language in these to make them more clear, use a little bit less jargon. Fix some grammar issues, all that, but thank you for that. That one.
Just thinking of, I know Commissioner Vandermark's not here, but number 31. I just thought maybe we could strengthen that a little bit, increase tree canopy in industrial, commercial areas while maintaining their intended use and contributions to the regional economy, like. Maybe if there's a way to sort of be a little more, just a little more, I don't know, like by this much or something, I don't know, yeah. A little more strengthening of that one perhaps.
Yeah, I think that's one that we'll be working towards it in several different ways. So don't want to be too specific to allow for that, but yeah, we can think about how we
I know it's always a dance of how specific you want to be to make sure it's something you can do.
Yeah, a long-term plan. But yeah, we can take a look at that one.
For number 41, sorry, I finally had time to read this, so.
Yeah, no, I got that.
Sorry, I wanted to do it a lot sooner than this. I was curious about, I love the emphasis on communication to the public about what we're doing and I was wondering about, is there also a way to take in feedback on the tree species? Because I wonder about folks who are saying, you know, why didn't you choose this species? And is there a little more of that two-way communication, or is a way to build that in with the education, if that makes sense? Or maybe like in practice, this is causing problem. This species is causing problems in our neighborhood, or yeah, I don't know, just a little more feedback.
Yeah, I think that could be incorporated as part of just the general communication education programming,
Updates to the documents that listeners should be choosing.
And like the other thing I was thinking about is, I think sometimes when folks see guidance from the city, like you have to plant one of these species, they're like, well, this seems arbitrary, or why are they trying to micromanage everything, you know? So like some of the whys, like this is why these are the species, like we have to rotate them every year, just a few of those high level things, you know, or these are really climate resilient, or they're not, they can fit in this, you know. I think sometimes it's because folks just, you know, they're not gonna know like the why, so yeah, just giving some of that might be helpful too. Yeah. Commissioner Nelson?
I'm not providing any comments. At Trees for Life Oregon, we had about a 4-hour meeting where we went through all 61 of them and sent very detailed comments to Belinda. So I'm not going to repeat any of that stuff, but we spent a lot of time on it, and I appreciate the work that's gone into this. And I think it is really important for commissioners to get their comments in now.
Yeah, thank you. And we have, we've reviewed those comments and have incorporated that into our revision. So they're not reflected in this version. But we did agree with many of those suggestions and really appreciate the time that it's taken. And so this will be going out for public comment. So there will be another chance for more review, but this is the last chance before that happens.
Commissioner Lilly?
Yeah, I was just wondering about the community engagement plan. Has there been a official tribal consultation with this?
I guess I would need more clarification about what you mean by official tribal consultation. But we have engaged with members of the Indigenous community sort of individually with our focus groups and some of our discussions. But also always open to do more. So really appreciate the suggestion, and if you have specific contacts, I'd be happy to do that.
Okay. Is there a official consultation is like with government to government relations, reaching out to the tribes that's done through the Office of Government Relations? I know there's not a City of Portland doesn't have a tribal liaison right now, but I still think it's important to the city do, at least make it an attempt to reach out to local tribes and see what their priorities are in this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just
we
to-
can,
yeah.
we can touch base with Office of Government Relations and see what options are available for that. That's great.
Great, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Thanks, Commissioner Lilly.
Thoughts? Or if you haven't had a chance to review the list and just have some top priorities you want to make sure I hear, happy to take those.
I think this is great. I think it's a lot.
Mhm.
And I appreciate the detail. I think it's what we need, but it's also, yeah, it's just so much that it's hard to wrap your mind around, and I know it's a big thing. Just wanna make sure that as we go forward with it, that we'll actually be able to do, these things, rather than just say, here's our giant pile of stuff, and be happy with that. But yeah, it's just it is a lot of particular details. So I hope that this can be adopted. As a non-binding resolution, that sucks. You're doing so much work for something that isn't ultimately going to force a hand in any direction, which I think is a bit of a shame. So not on your
Yeah.
project at all. I think
Yeah.
that's a larger city issue where I wish that this work would be something that would actually force the city to do something with it. So yeah, I really appreciate at least that we are doing everything that we possibly can except get city council to say, this shall be done. Yeah.
I appreciate that. Well, I will add that part of the benefit of having a technical advisory committee is we have all the bureau representatives to ensure that they are on board with this. Part of the reason it can't be binding is because there's budgetary implications and future city councils can't really bind a future city council to fund certain things. So some of this it's non-binding in the sense that budgets are allocated on an annual basis by the city council, and so we can't always obligate a future one to fund something that we agree right now.
Yeah.
So that's part of the process, but I agree, and that's why I think we're trying to build in performance measures and accountability, which will be in the draft as well, to the very least be transparent of are we making progress or not. If we're not, that gives us something to come back with after that, so. But I agree.
Yeah, appreciate it.
And many of these things are already on staff's work plans or
Yeah.
will be built into them in the near term. So that helps a little bit.
Yeah, that's probably exciting, like, one of the exciting parts of this is collecting all things that are already ongoing. That's been kind of fun to go through the actions and identify, a lot of this that is being asked to get done is already ongoing. It might need to be scaled up, it might need to be just improved in some ways, but it's just been encouraging to, like, when you really look at it as a complete picture of what the city's doing on these issues, there is a lot of good work being done.
I have a lot of hearts and exclamation points also in my notes.
Yeah.
Like things that I was like, yay. That's
And
great to see.
hearing the positive reception from other bureaus on the new things being proposed, like there's not been a lot of things where it's just been like, oh, we can't do that. I think there's been a lot of agreement, like, yeah, that should be done. Next challenge is funding and implementing, but I think a lot of agreement on what direction a lot of this needs to go in.
Well, that was one of my wonderings too for number 19, incorporate trees and vegetation into medians as part of roadway projects, which I know is not really up to urban forestry because it's like PBOT would have to, also,
Sure.
like you just said, they'd have to be on board with it. So that was like, it's not exactly a directive. It's more, maybe it's just a statement that urban forestry is gonna be working, like make that a priority to work with the other bureaus to like figure out how that can work.
Yeah,
Is that,
exactly.
would you say that's right? Okay.
Yeah, although there
Exactly
are,
right.
I mean, all the other bureaus that are listed as associated with an action and the plan have reviewed them and they're on board in their names.
That's
Will be
great.
listed right next to it. You're sort of just seeing the
Right.
action item. There's more of the implementation piece
Yeah.
where their bureaus are listed. So we met with PBOT staff about that action a got their support.
I mean, let's just pause and recognize that, because I feel like that hasn't historically been the way our city has worked, so that's great. So good work to everybody trying to break those silos down and work together.
Yeah, for sure.
So in terms of next steps for the plan and the UFC's engagement with it, we'll have a public comment period for the draft plan in February. During that time, we'll have an in-person open house, and I'll be sharing engagement like flyers and other information about that once we have all the details finalized. There'll also be a way to submit comments online. And then at the February 20th Urban Forestry Commission meeting, I'll come and give a more detailed overview of everything in the plan that we haven't been able to touch on in detail so far. After that, we'll make revisions incorporating all of the public's feedback and then recommend it to City Council for adoption spring of 2025. So one last piece of question that I have for you all is the plan. We're aiming to release it as soon as we can in February, but it's possible that it will be released fairly close to the meeting, and I want to make sure you all have time to review it if you want an opportunity to submit comments directly to Brian and I. So we're offering, if there's an interest, we could have a separate meeting after that meeting just to hear your comments. That's something people are interested in.
Would that meeting, would we be making decisions where we need a quorum, or would it be more just another feedback kind of listening?
Just sharing comments.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it could even be sort of like a drop-in. We're on Zoom for 2 hours, people can drop in or so, but if we can schedule a time that works for everyone, that'd be ideal.
Or it could be like the policy subcommittee meeting, like we
that's
did
true.
last.
Commissioner Lilly?
Yeah, just to echo that, I like the idea of like having another feedback loop, or opportunity for what's comment. But I would also like to, I'd like to attend like the public comment meetings, and hear what the public has to say. And then I'll probably have like a better idea, like if I want to share more too. So just in the timing of things, I'm probably lining that up more than with our UFC meetings. Thanks.
Thanks.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, we won't be having a formal public comment meeting for this. That's what the open house is. So I guess that would be the best thing to come to. Otherwise, it'll just be online sessions. But you're definitely invited and welcome to the open house.
Brian, can we make sure to get that, those dates sent to us?
Mhm. Yeah, for sure.
Co-Chair Feldstein?
Yeah, the only other thought I had, which I didn't express, during our general comment part of this discussion, but it's still there for me is, especially since a lot of these things have required funding and that type of thing, at some point, are the actions going to be prioritized? And do we need community input on that? So, to have a couple of tiers, otherwise you kind of can be left with, oh, unless we achieve all of this, we failed. Is there a first tier that people can't live without, and a second tier wish list, advised actions? I'm just throwing that out there. And, just curious about what staff think about where within this that might happen, where within this process.
We have prioritized the actions and given them a timeline. That's sort of part of this implementation piece that we were working on while this was being shared with you. So that's why you haven't seen it. But we did organize all of the actions into things, kind of a 3-tiered priority level. So that'll be available when the plan is public. And that's mostly based on feasibility and funding. So actions that rely on current funding or funding we know we will have very soon, or will rely on staff that we're in the process of trying to hire. Those are higher priority, more feasible because we know we can actually implement them soon. So it wasn't, they're not prioritized necessarily based on community feedback, it's more based on feasibility and funding.
Yeah,
But did
that's
incorporate
perfect.
community feedback into that as best we could.
Yeah, that's very nice to hear. And, you know, you might find that as you get community feedback on that part of it, you know, one or two things may surprisingly increase in priority, or decrease.
Yeah, I think we're certainly open to that and we'll revisit the priorities once we hear from community, but it's also in wanting to sort of be realistic and accountable. Some of these actions require entirely new programs and, you know, even if it's a really high priority, doesn't mean we could do it next year. It might take a few years to scale up. So we'll definitely balance that.
Thank you.
I guess, is there preference for that next meeting to be policy subcommittee meeting or a separate meeting on that?
Might as well use the meeting time for the already existing committee.
It's relevant.
That makes sense, yeah.
Okay, that's all I have, unless there's any other questions. A little extra time.
Just like to commend Linda for the effort. Fantastic progress. It's a very complex plan. Exciting to be part of it. Great job so far.
Belinda, do you have a favorite part?
The vision and goals would be my favorite, and I think that's because we had an opportunity to work so much. To me, that best reflects sort of the interests and priorities from the community. Worked a lot with our community advisory committee, multiple meetings with them, and Commissioner McMillan was part of that, to really try to be as responsive as we could to what we heard.
And just to put it into perspective, how late are we on this? I mean, cause I think it's a big deal, like how long is, when was the last one
Yeah.
published?
2004.
2004, so think about how much has changed in Portland since then. Yeah. So,
There's also some similarities looking back to the challenges in the first, the last plan. Street tree maintenance was called out there and it is really exciting to be able to put it into this plan and know that we actually have funding to move forward.
it's fantastic. Took 20 years.
Or 100. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah,
it's like
yeah, right.
still-
Yeah.
We haven't got it yet.
Right, right, right.
Nearly there.
Hey, anything else, Brian, that we should?
I would like to see the rest of Commissioner Lily's Christmas sweater.
I know, me
because
too.
I'm only seeing the top and I just need to know if
Is
that's
it a dog? Oh, it's a cat.
It's awesome.
Ah.
Yes.
That's a
You
very good
win.
sweater.
Best holiday sweater.
Totally worth it.
Thanks for bringing some joy to our
Yeah.
meeting.
Other than that, though, unless commissioners have any kind of hot topic items they'd like to bring up, I think we can end the meeting early.
I have a hot topic item.
Yeah.
I'm on the PSEF work group committee and we're doing a lot of small work right now, but it's gonna be picking up in the new year. And one thing, not that this is an official kind of representation of me telling you what we're talking about, but one thing that came up last week or the last meeting, was having a specific goal for that group to be kind of not a decision maker, but on the level of we wanna actually make things happen as opposed to just hearing from city staff, hearing from folks that are happening. And one thing that I proposed that I thought would be kind of fun that I wanted to bring up to you guys, just as a means of potentially working with developing a street tree maintenance program is I'm going to do my best to convince that work group, to convince the people who have the power of the purse to make it such that if any trees planted through PSEF funds or by the city at all for any of these other programs, that the city would take care of it, or that it would be taken care of in perpetuity. And this is different than the establishment, where the establishment is through the contracts, that's usually 3 to 5 years, and then they wipe their hands of it. Friends of Trees is a similar thing. They take care of small trees, they work with it as best they can, but they don't have any ability to take care of a 5-plus-year-old tree that then goes back to the adjacent property owner. So I don't know if it'll work. I don't know if anyone has any good reason or anything else to say about it, but I brought it up at that meeting and I wanted to bring it up here because I think it would be fun for us to play with that idea as a means of ensuring that trees will be planted where otherwise the adjacent property owner would not want it planted because then they will have to maintain it. So it's been a big barrier that's come up a lot. We've talked about it here, and I think that would be a really appropriate way for the city to have good faith with their tree planting. And initially, it could start with a very discrete group of trees at a very particular time that the acting city forester in your normal position would get to work on. Say, okay, great, in 5 years, we have 2,000 small trees that we need to maintain. And it will give a really good opportunity for the city, I think, to come back and work with the adjacent property owner, say, hey, how's it going? What exactly is happening? What do you want done with this tree? And we'll just always be there to maintain it. So I think that'd be a very good barrier. And I just wanted to bring that up to you guys because I thought that'd become a fun idea. And then if we keep planting this amount of trees for the next 20 years, all of a sudden we have 100,000 trees that are all being maintained by the city. So it could be a fun backdoor way to get the city to maintain all of their trees, but not the really big expensive trees, only the little trees that they could do, one crew could do 30 different trees in a day if you're just doing a couple small snips with a small crew.
Do you mean that as a sort of interim street maintenance program until citywide is implemented?
No, I assume that it would be, well, I guess potentially, yeah, interim would be the right term for it, but it would really be, in my vision of it, a way to just, or not a way, but it would be not interim. I guess it would just kind of
Like
meld
a
into
slow roll of
exactly,
rollout.
yeah, a slow rollout might be the best way to do
Yeah.
it. A slow rollout that isn't officially a rollout
Mhm.
until all of a sudden you look back 20 years ago.
It's a backdoor.
Yeah.
Are you referring to street trees only?
I think mostly, yes, but I think that would also, I think that's a good place to start, let me put it that way. But with the free tree giveaway, have a tree planted in your yard, if the city planted that tree, you can show that, which we have the records for. I think it would be at least in a good faith to have the city come out and help take care of it. Maybe not actually do the pruning, but maybe come out, give recommendations and say, yeah, your tree's fine. Or potentially have a means of a fund that you can have the work done and then ask for money back. Kind of like a rebate that PGE would send out. You plant a tree, they will send you another $50 to take it off your bill, something like that. But I think starting with street trees would be a really effective way to account for that with trees that we already own in places that we already own. And if that is a possibility to move it on to the private property trees, I think that would be a really great means of having the city also be able to find a way to make tree care a fundable thing through the city of Portland. So right now, it would be inequitable for us to just manage everybody's trees. Some people would get money, some people would not. So if we plant it, we'll maintain it in a broad sense. So potentially, yeah.
Thank you.
A good conversation in the next agriculture can be.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I know that it sounds a little bit similar to how I think Seattle does it, where Seattle only maintains, as part of their street tree maintenance program, only maintains the trees that they plant. So it does create a little bit of a scattershot management system, and it does create confusion because then property owners are like, my neighbor's tree is taken care of but not mine, and so there's some implementation challenges. But I know there's cities that do it in a similar way.
That's great
So
to know.
interesting. Yeah.
And that I could see that like somebody bought the house and then the tree, the previous owner had made the choice to plant a
Right.
non-city tree, right?
Right, right,
And then
yeah.
they're like, oh, but that wasn't my choice, but now I don't get that.
Yeah,
There could be some
exactly.
unintended
So
challenges.
tree maintenance citywide, still the gold standard that we're moving towards, but
Mhm.
other like options of like building like a slower rollout of it while still accounting for people's concerns around having tree
Yeah.
planted.
Hey, if they make enough noise, they're like, hey, no, why isn't my tree getting
Yeah,
taken care of?
exactly,
You
yeah,
know?
yep,
It'll work.
yeah, making noise is how we got the funding in the first place.
Yeah,
Keep making noise.
Well, that brings up like something we've talked about, which is maybe folks who are on those committees, maybe we can have like a
Yeah.
5-minute slot where you can share some updates, like
Yeah,
I
that's a
know
great
Commissioner
thought.
McMillan's, we just is on the Community Advisory Committee, and then I know like Commissioner Feldstein is on Parks Board, so like, and anyone who's got something like that, that maybe
Yeah.
when there's something to share, you could let us know and we could give you some time on the agenda.
Yeah, that's great. Maybe the next one, we can at least have time for the just ETC update in general. The Equal Tree Canopy Advisory Group meets every other month right now.
It will
It's
be,
been a little
right now
bit.
it's every month, now,
Yeah.
starting the new year, it'll be every other,
It'll
so,
be every other month,
yeah, unfortunately, the next one will be the week following our meeting,
Mhm.
so,
Might be a February update or so, but
yeah, February might be a better
Yeah.
time for that.
Okay,
Think
that's
about
great.
that.
Yeah. That's that.
Yeah, are there other commissioners who have some, like the who I didn't just name, who might have updates like that we could plan ahead for?
I think it is a good idea to have regular reports from UFC members who have been delegated to this or that committee. I mean, they're representing us and they're gathering information that would be useful for all of us to know. So they're not just reporting their information to urban forestry, they're representing us. So I think that would be, actually, I think it should be a standing agenda item. That's not uncommon for other entities to have a standing agenda item of committee reports.
Co-Chair Feldstein.
Oh, yeah, just a comment. I like that. You know, being on 2 other boards, sometimes that could be very empty, where you just walk through these kind of subcommittee standing, you know, agenda items. And so a happy medium could be that, you know, we ask the chairs of the subcommittees to tell us when they've got something substantive or when they think they're going to have something substantive, you know, so that we could hold time on the agenda, on the next agenda for that.
Yeah, agreed. It could just be as needed.
But it is informative if we hear that nothing is happening on a committee.
Yeah.
That is information that is useful.
Sounds reasonable to have a 5-minute standing thing,
We could fit
because then if it
that in.
is no news, then that's 30 seconds.
And then if folks feel like it could take longer, please do reach out and we can try to
Yeah,
plan
that's a good
better for
point.
that extra time.
Yeah. Mhm.
Maybe we can tack it on after the Forester's report. It's like a, yeah, kind of a part of the meeting structure.
Yeah, I think that's great. I like it.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all. Well, maybe we'll get 7 minutes back to our day.
Yeah,
But thanks, everybody. See you next month.
Happy
Thanks,
holidays.
everyone.
Yeah, have a great holiday.
Okay. Take care.